Okay, welcome to LaRouche Beck's weekly strategic update with Mike Stager, and I'm Tony Papert, your host. The Mike entitled today's talk, "The Enemy is on the Run, Time to Finish the Job." We're meeting at a critical time for our country, as you know. As the clock ticks down to what Donald Trump has rightly called the final battle for our country in November of 2024, many Americans are rising up to the challenge and really changing and improving their mentality, their morality, their intellect, and their courage. As I think you may see all around you, I do, but you'll see some examples of that in just a few minutes, especially from California, which just held its Republican convention with Donald Trump. We also see similar things in the fights going on in the Congress, in the fight that led up to the passage of a continuing resolution excluding Ukraine funding on Saturday night, and which will go forward to a motion to vacate the chair of the House of Representatives, filed by Matt Gaetz and probably others. So Mike has been in the thick of this, as have many of the people on the phone, on the line with us today on the Zoom. And Mike is going to make some remarks. Then we're going to hear from the front lines in California, a quite revolutionary convention of the Republican Party there. So, Mike, take it away.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, so let me just start with situating where we are. We said that about 6 weeks ago, those of you who have been on the calls may know, we said that the next 6 weeks, so around the middle of August, kind of the hot days of summer, that the next 6 weeks would be critical. And there were two major, you might even say three major aspects in front of us. One was to shut down the weaponized, you could say coup or weaponized, Department of Justice targeting Donald Trump. That this was not just a threat to President Trump, was not just a threat to the election of 24, but was very much a question of, would our Constitution survive? And given the nature of these trials, some of which, if you watched the news today, you saw the kind of the circus show that's being run in New York, which is supposed to last even for the next few months. And then soon after that, other trials will begin, and the intensity will only increase beginning in the month of March. And there have been, constant attempts at gag orders and other attempts to silence President Trump. So it was obvious in the middle of August that we had to mobilize, given a certain time frame of the end of September, to consolidate a kind of fight within the House Republican Caucus to shift the political fight away from just kind of propaganda warfare that the media, that the enemy constantly deploys, but shift it towards a direct counterattack using the powers of the House of Representatives on the budget, on spending, on impeachment proceedings like Merrick Garland. We had called and put out a petition calling for the impeachment of Merrick Garland, and which was delivered to Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Kevin McCarthy, among a number of other members of Congress and other political leaders. And so that was the first major tenet. The second tenet of what we said was a major mobilization was to shut down this ridiculous primary. Because in the attempt to hamstring Trump into campaigning in South Carolina and Iowa and New Hampshire, and continuing to basically undermine what Trump is building as the new Republican Party, a party of the working class, they're continuing to put on display with these ridiculous debates, these kind of clown shows, food fights, that an old Republican Party, the Bush League Republican Party, of which, of course, as many of you know, in Texas, the Bush dynasty is getting really beaten and bruised. It's not yet dead. I don't think it's dead and buried, but Ken Paxton went directly up against it, and the MAGA faction prevailed in that impeachment attempt of Attorney General Paxton. And that was entirely the Bush dynasty there. But this question of shutting down this Republican primary and enabling and freeing President Trump and the MAGA forces around the country and really around the world to mobilize around Trump as the leading presidential candidate in a general election. Because Trump would then not be spending his time in Iowa, where he's sure to win, even with all the possible fraud attempts, or South Carolina, but to hit places like Detroit, like Atlanta, like Phoenix, Milwaukee, Las Vegas, the places that are going to be critical to building up, one, a working class coalition in this country that can viably govern, and two, immediately put the pressure on the enemy to go into their territory where they control the election meddling, where they control various elements, where they have these so-called political machines, and to recruit from within them a real patriotic sense of impulse to go after the real enemy, which is not, white racism or any of that character, but is really the kind of financial class that's been has acted as a predator upon the American people and our economy for decades, which is largely what Washington, D.C. governs on behalf of. And that's what a general election really is to Trump. Now, we said that 6 weeks ago. In the course of that, we have seen as I mentioned, the fight in Texas against the Bush dynasty. But then we also saw the UAW strike, which is now in its third week. It's expanded to something like 25,000 workers. And Trump gave an incredibly important policy, speech, and political commitment to take on this globalist class, what he called the ultimate strike against the globalist class, which is that kind of globalist financial class that feeds off of the productive efforts of the working class of our country and really globally. So those were the two main elements. And the third, always implicit, is that this war in Ukraine, which could become a world war and a nuclear war, has to be shut down. So we said 6 weeks ago, this is critical. And we knew that the end of September had two fundamental components to it. One was that Kevin McCarthy had made promises to the House Republican Caucus that they would pass independent appropriations bills and that those would have to be passed by the end of September. But they weren't coming back until September 12th. Now, one appropriations bill had already passed. They were going to leave everything to the last 3 weeks. And it was unlikely that they were really going to get the job done, that they were going to push a continuing resolution and then another one and then an omnibus bill. And an omnibus bill is one of these bills that you pay for, investigating drunk mice and if they can still, mate while drunk, and how intoxicated do they have to be until they stop mating. These kinds of federal expenditures on God knows what, plus all of the wars, all of the bailouts, all of the green stuff, all the inflation. So there would be real internal resistance because a number of House Republicans had gotten agreement from Speaker McCarthy so that he could become Speaker, that would not occur. And implicit in that was the ability to address the weaponization of government, the funding of the DOJ, the funding of the Ukraine war. And it would also be implicitly a mobilization of the Republican Party, where it holds actual federal power in the House of Representatives, to fight on behalf of not just Trump, but the broad base of the American working class, and most importantly, our Constitution itself, which would rally more people to a sense of real politics, not the show politics that we're constantly presented with. And that has certainly happened. If you haven't paid attention, I'm sure many of you have heard at least elements. There was a real fight from up to 21 House Republicans and a handful of leading Senate Republicans, including Rand Paul and J.D. Vance, both of whom said, nothing's going to pass unanimously in the Senate with Ukraine funding. They were talking, Biden asked for $24 billion. And McConnell and Schumer said, that's just like for one quarter. We just want to get $24 billion in for the first 3 months of next year. These guys just want to keep it, they're ready for another $100 billion. Keep it going, baby. But they talked about $6 billion. Rand Paul said it's not going to happen with unanimous vote. You're going to have to call this up for a vote. It's not going to happen. It's like pro forma. J.D. Vance then did a letter with a few other senators, and there became a kind of boiling opposition to what McConnell wanted to do, what kind of votes he could get, that the Ukraine question, because of efforts by Gaetz, because of efforts by other House Republicans, and especially by the efforts of the American people, because it wasn't just LaRouche PAC who was calling upon its supporters and activists to take effort over these last 6 weeks. People from Charlie Kirk and Turning Point, Steve Bannon and his War Room, numerous other groups recognized this has got to be mobilized. Russ Vaught and his group. I mean, numerous people saw that this was going to be a critical place to battle, and that the funding of the special counsel, the role of the DOJ, the weaponization of the FBI, going to Trump, going to parent teachers associations, you name it, it had just been so egregious that a fight could really be picked, and the American people would respond positively to those efforts because it was real policy. So efforts were done to shut down the Ukraine funding, even in the Senate. Eventually, a continuing resolution did pass that did not hold money for Ukraine. And ultimately, the Senate passed that. They didn't kick it back with Ukraine funding. This put pressure on the Democrats to have to pass it. But who knows what's important, what's not. That's just how it unfolded. And because there is something more substantial on the hearts of people today than at any time in our nation's history that any of us have perhaps participated in, people like Representative Matt Gaetz and others recognize that this is not simply a time to pass a few appropriations bills. They've pushed 4 through in votes last week, which shut down Ukraine funding, also prevented on the defense appropriations bill, also made it that it is illegal to put American troops on the ground in Ukraine. They also reduced the Secretary of Defense's pay to $1 annually. So that's all fine and very good. But at core, in addition to the fight in Ukraine, is to defend President Trump because he's the ultimate peacemaker. As the president of Hungary said, bring President Trump back. That's how we create peace. And there's a DOJ appropriations bill that has yet to come up. So they passed 4. There's like, I don't know, 11 or 12 total or 9. The number seems to change, but there's another handful or more that still have to be appropriated. And McCarthy has apparently made a commitment to do that. And they've given themselves 45 days with the government funded at previous levels. Okay, that's where we stand right now. But Matt Gaetz over the weekend declared that he's going to call for a vacate the chair motion, to vacate the speaker. And under the rules McCarthy agreed to, one member of the House majority party has the ability to call for a vacate the chair. So he agreed to this kind of procedural option, that if he didn't abide by the agreement, that they would be able to do this. Another part of the agreement was no bill would pass with a majority of Democrats helping to pass it. And that's how the continuing resolution passed, with a majority of Democrats. So McCarthy is in violation of a number of the promises he made. And it's obvious that this is how Congress should work. Even though our budget, our federal budget, is incredibly bloated. And unfortunately, that's kind of what may hold these band of Republicans together, is the sense that we're just spending too much in general. There's not a lot of clear policy focus. At least Matt Gaetz is advertising it like we've really got to deal with the debt and the budget, which is certainly true. But that's not the heart of the Constitution today. The heart of the Constitution today is the threat of nuclear war and the weaponized DOJ attack against President Trump. So we want to help make sure that that is the continued focus going into this period. Gaetz today said, so he said that over the course of Sunday talk shows, he's calling to remove McCarthy. One person can do it, and it would mean that either the Democrats don't vote with Gaetz and his band of Republicans, and McCarthy stays speaker because Democrats would support him, or if Democrats did vote with Gaetz and his band of Republicans, then McCarthy would lose the speakership, and a new speaker would have to be brought in to bear. There's no reason speculating on who. Various names have been mentioned. None of them mean anything to me right now. And we'll find out how as this process goes forward. But Gaetz said that on Sunday. Today, he accused McCarthy of doing a backroom side deal on Ukraine funding. And Gaetz specifically wanted clarity on that before he made a motion to vacate the chair, which he's promised to do sometime this week. And now Trump is not weighed in on this at all, but our friends from California said earlier today, when Trump was in California, McCarthy's home state, at the Republican convention, not a word about McCarthy, not a word of praise, not a word of mention, nothing. Gaetz is reported as having talked to President Trump because the question at core, even if they're not going to advertise this or promote it on CNN and ABC, is shutting down the weaponization of government. And if McCarthy's not going to take that on, he's not going to defend the Constitution, and he has to go. He has to be removed. And you've also got to make our Constitution the fight. And the weaponization of government, not just targeting Trump, but targeting many Americans, while they let scot-free the bankers who blew out the system in 2008 and the Federal Reserve, which bailed them out, the people that have continued to push us into these illegal wars and forever wars, hold these people accountable. That's the people that have committed the real crimes and atrocities against the American people. And that's certainly what Trump is fighting for. Make that the fight, and you will increasingly rally more and more Americans. We heard from people that work inside UAW auto plants here in Michigan that union representatives came out of Trump's speech telling other workers who they knew were pro-Trump, wow, that speech had real impact. That speech really hit the nail on the head in terms of national policy and what's actually at stake for the auto union, which is not a little bit better wages, which they'd certainly deserve given what's been done to them the last 15 years since the Obama-Biden bailouts of the big three auto companies, where the unions just got shafted by Obama-Biden, shafted hard, just like every other working American did by the Obama-Biden bailout program. But what Trump is raising is the green agenda will eliminate half or more of their jobs in the matter of 3-4 years. So what's a little bit better wage mean now when you have no job in 3 years? That's what's at core. Trump recognizes it, and it makes it clear that it's not just the cultural issues that have gone so insane. It is the absolute insanity of the economic programs that are pushing the American people off a cliff rapidly. And it's a question of, in that kind of environment, now we've got a stage set, given the fights that took place over the last few weeks of September, much of which many of you maybe have engaged in, calling your congressman, going out in the streets, just talking to your neighbors, talking to people at grocery stores, is now to recognize that it's time to take this thing and really become aggressive, that we can force a real fundamental shift. No one in our government has been held accountable for the lies, frauds, and destruction that under their watch has either they've let occur or they have actually directly promoted and pushed. So if McCarthy is going to be held to account for his lying and misleading, because they could have easily passed appropriations bills all throughout the summer. They could have actually done what Congress should do, just as a basic sense, and then made the Senate Republicans respond, or Senate generally respond to their appropriations bills. The lack to do that meant a lack of commitment to his promises, but more so, he's not engaged in the fight that determines whether our republic survives. And at core of that today, as we all know, is President Trump. So this is where we stand. The situation in Europe over the Ukraine war is quickly changing. Poland, its closest ally, is increasingly distancing itself from the Ukrainian government and war effort. They have an election this month in October, but they've also been increasing kind of attacks upon one another between Ukraine and Poland. The Slovak government just voted in a majority, not a majority party, but the largest party of votes with about 26% that was explicitly against. I think one of their main slogans were like no more arms, no more ammunition, no more support.
Not one round. Not one round.
Not one round. Yeah, not one round. Thanks, Tony. So, and that sentiment is growing through, and Hungary certainly is of a similar government. So this is a key grouping of countries, actually. In Prague, and the Czech government, or the Prague people, also had a major mobilization. That was a nexus. That's a certain Eastern European nexus of Poland, Czech, Slovakia, and Hungary. So there's a kind of growing resistance, and they're the closest. Many of them share borders with Ukraine over this war. So forces internationally are mobilizing. We've seen this also in Africa, which we've covered on our website. But where this was most alive is certainly inside the United States. So I want to close my remarks there, ask people to jump into the queue for some discussion and questions tonight. And at this point, throw it back to Tony.
Right. So what I'd like, again, as Mike said, please raise your hand to join in the discussion. But before we take the discussion, we wanted to get reports from the very noteworthy Republican convention in California over the weekend. So we wanted to begin with Gerald Pechnik, Mindy Pechnik, and Deborah Baber, and then that's why I say raise your hand for discussion, and then move to general discussion after those reports. Yes. So Gerald.
Can you hear me okay?
Hear you great.
Okay. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. That's the beginning of the chorus of Henry V, in which a single individual walks onto a stage, and his name is Chorus, but he's only one guy. And what he's doing is asking the audience to use their imagination and use their to understand what he is describing. So I'm going to be the prologue here, and then we're going to have Mindy Pechnik and Deborah Baber in this four movements in the symphony. You heard me say three people. Well, the fourth movement is not written yet, and that's your part. When you come onto the call, or you hear about the call or discuss it. So here's the predicament we were in. And actually, what I'm about to tell you started with this call, started with the LaRouche PAC Zoom call, not 6 weeks ago, about 6 months ago, when Mike and Keisha and others were telling you to go to your local meetings and go talk to people about what's going on. And one of the people who's on this call, named Paul, actually went to his area, to candidates and everyone, and started talking to them. And one of the people he talked to was Deborah Baber, who, as a result of Paul hearing on this call to go talk to people, she got on the call. And so then she started getting more active with us, as you hear. So the problem was the California 6 months ago convention in Sacramento was about to happen, and there was not a word about Donald Trump. Well, hey, we're going to a Republican convention and no one is talking about Trump. None. And on top of that, the media was reporting nonstop in terms of San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, all the major blab press was reporting a poll from Berkeley that said Ron DeSantis was way more popular than Trump. He was 15, 20 points ahead. Like, you might as well give up, you know? So the media, you know, Berkeley academia, the political institutions were totally corrupt, you know? And so what are you supposed to do? You know, call up the media and say, hey guys, could you really moderate a little on the lying, lie a little less? You know, call up the Berkeley poll and say, what kind of poll did you do? Anyway, what we decided to do was call all the delegates to the California Republican parties, about 12 or 1,300 of them. And we said, are you finding what's being reported in the media that this state is pro-DeSantis and anti-Trump? You know, Trump is not very popular. He's too this, he's too got big mouth, he's too that. Is this what you find in your area? We called up the delegates in Fresno, in Sacramento, in San Diego, in Orange County, in Ventura, in Riverside, in San Bernardino. And to a person, they all said, what? Are these people on drugs or something? And they said, absolutely not. Trump is far and away. So as a result of that, what we did is we took a leaf from the training from Lyndon LaRouche, which is, instead of being a victim and saying, oh, we're being victimized by the big guys, Lyndon LaRouche started the Fusion Energy Foundation in 1974 when no one else was talking about it. Lyndon LaRouche started the National Anti-Drug Coalition in 1980 when people started saying, drugs was good for you. You'll be creative. You'll be a real genius if you use LSD, marijuana, whatever else. So we took a leaf from Lynn's book and we said, let's start something that never existed before. And we started calling it an ad hoc committee for Trump. And that morphed into the California MAGA Project. Calling up the delegates, you are for Trump, with us, let's all get together. And we started a Zoom call so we could reach out to these people. And every Friday night for the last 6 months, with this, starting from that idea that we would be able to outflank the enemy, we started the California MAGA Project. And we've had Zoom calls every Friday for the last 6 months. So that's the prelude. Thank you very much. And now to our second movement,
which is Mindy.
Yeah, hi, everyone. So I will pick up on a couple of things that actually happened at the convention. And it was really what we've done. And Deborah Baber, myself, and Gerald have become like a trio that have made this happen. And it was really remarkable because we had a meeting at the convention. I mean, first of all, we had a table, a booth at the convention with our California MAGA banner, our literature, and that table was probably the busiest table at the entire convention. And what we hoped would come about as a result of starting the California MAGA, which was to unite all the pro-Trump forces in the state. No matter what other organization you belong to, we're going to come together as a united force in California, connected to the other fights around the country, to actually ensure that Donald Trump got elected, that we educated the base of the country around the Agenda 47 of Donald Trump and what that means. And obviously to get him elected and then go beyond after the 4 years of Donald Trump. And what came together at the conference was amazing. and Deborah will go through some of this, so I won't go through all of it right now. But we had a meeting. We, got a hospitality suite, and there were over 300 people at that meeting Saturday afternoon between 3:15 and 4:15. And the energy in the room was just incredible, because people found that there was a way to not be alone, to be together, that there was a social process that was actually going to do something, and do it with the profound ideas and principles that the Constitution, as Mike mentioned earlier, of this country represents, and what the embodiment around a Trump presidency would mean, and a transformation of the American people to become a real citizenry of a republic. And I want to say one thing about at the convention that happened, a couple of things in that respect, because this goes to what Mike was just talking about the weaponized DOJ and the question that we saw. I had submitted a resolution to the Resolutions Committee to end the two-tier justice system. And it called on the California GOP to pass this resolution. And it said, therefore, be it resolved that the delegates of the Fall California 203 State Convention fully support the efforts of the members of Congress, including Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Andy Ogles, Ronnie Jackson, to defund the special prosecution of Jack Smith, to support Jim Jordan's investigation into the role of the federal government in support of state prosecutions in New York and Georgia, and also to support the efforts to impeach Attorney General Merrick Garland. Now, you would think at the CAGOP convention, that would be something they would want to pass, right? Well, the Resolutions Committee said, no, we can't have that pass because we can't endorse Donald Trump. Well, that's another, in fact, they should endorse Donald Trump, but this was not even an endorsement of Donald Trump. This was a support of his right to run for president. It was to put an end for everybody against the weaponized DOJ and FBI and CIA and British intelligence. And it was also to defend the Constitution of the United States. Now, we brought this to the floor on Sunday of the convention when you had all the delegates there to vote. And I called it out and I got it brought before the entire body of the convention. And the irony is one of the resolutions that did pass the Resolutions Committee, well, this for end of two-tier justice was defeated, was a resolution calling on that the California Republican Party urges the President and Congress of the United States to support the self-determination of the Armenians of Arshaka, I'm pronouncing the city wrong, and recognize the democratic independence of the Republic. Now, I'm not opposed to supporting the Armenians. Of course not. I love Armenians. But imagine this, the CAGOP leadership supported that, but not ending the two-tiered justice system of our country, of our own country, which fits with what we've been seeing with the support of the Ukrainian, arming the Ukrainians and the fight over stopping the funding to the Ukraine, rather than fight to defend the actual United States Constitution. So we did finally get it up for a vote at the convention, and we needed a 2/3 vote to pass it. We didn't get the 2/3 due to a lot of proxy votes, but we did get 53%. We did get a majority of the delegates supporting ending the two-tier justice. So I go through this story to give you a sense that the grassroots at this convention were completely active. The last convention, you didn't have that yet, but now we had it, and they were not going to sit back and allow the leadership to, not support Trump. And in fact, one of our friends, Agnes, we had collected over 360, something like that, almost 400 petition signatures to call on the CAGOP convention to endorse Trump. That was out of about 981 delegates and associate delegates that were there. And we had it brought before Agnes from Mom's Angels brought it to the opening of the agenda for the convention. And again, it didn't pass because of the proxy votes, but the grassroots in the convention let it be clear known what they really support, and that is President Trump to be the nominee of the Republican Party, and that the CAG convention should have endorsed him. So it was a good fight, is what I'm saying. And our faction really had a very strong hand. And this is the same thing that's weighing, as Mike said earlier, on McCarthy. Is he going to fight against the weaponization of the DOJ? Is he going to fight against the destruction of the US Constitution? Or like the rest of the GOP leadership, at the, CAGOP leadership, and obviously it's not unanimous around every leader, but the key leadership would not bend to the question of defending the country. But I want to stress this, and then I'll close my remarks, is that it was electric throughout the convention. I've never seen such a grouping of people like we had in that hospitality meeting and coming up to our table. We got lots of contacts. People want to go out and organize. And I think this was a turning point at this convention. I think we made history at this convention in a major, substantial way, that if Trump was there, he spoke at the luncheon on Friday afternoon, and the place was packed. Over 1,000 people there to hear him. And you had DeSantis also there, Tim Scott there. The DeSantis table, if you saw 2 people there, it was a lot. Our table for Trump, the California MAGA booth, as I said earlier, it was completely surrounded. It was like electric between Trump's luncheon and the organizing that we did with our friends from throughout the convention. Created, I think, a something that the leadership is going to have to deal with. And the good thing was that our voices really changed the what's going to come forward. Let me leave it at that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mindy. Now we want to hear from Deborah, but is she there?
Deborah,
You should just raise her hand. If you
Raise your hand, Deborah, please. Okay, there she is. Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. To just put an exclamation point to what Mindy was just saying about the proxies, there were 1,274 recognized voters, so to speak, towards the quorum. Of that, 588 were proxies, meaning that they physically weren't there. Their vote was being carried by somebody else. So that makes it really significant when we look at the actual physical bodies that were there on the petition that we did, which was a brainchild of one of our California MAGA members who came up with it Saturday evening after this Friday night after the Trump luncheon. We designed the petition that night, and within less than 24 hours, we had collected 304 signatures. And then by Sunday morning, before we all went into the convention hall, we had collected another 30 or 40 signatures for it. So essentially, we had almost half of the people there, physically there, delegates, associate delegates, had signed the petition to endorse Donald Trump. Now, what's really important about that too, and I'll just give you a couple of figures here, is that I don't know if the young lady I spoke with at the Marriott at Anaheim was supposed to give me these figures, but she did. I called to ask what the attendance was that they recorded, meaning the meals that they provided or refreshments that they provided in the case of Tim Scott, for each of the speakers. And so we start, of course, with Donald Trump at 1,536. Of that one, that they were completely sold out. That went on sale in early August. Within about 72 hours, the tickets were all gone. Right up to and including the moment when they started talking, DeSantis, Ramaswamy, and Tim Scott, you could still get tickets for their events. In fact, Mindy stopped in briefly into Tim Scott's meeting. I think it was Mindy who told me this, and she said, I didn't pay for this, so I'm invited to come on in, and the person said, oh no, come on in, we need some more people. So now with the rest of the numbers. So Trump, 1,536. Next place runner-up, Ramaswamy at 385. DeSantis, 360. And Tim Scott at 160. That was it. What's also really interesting about all of that is that where we were sitting, Mindy, Gerald, and I, we were sitting in a preferred seating area where we had a good view of most of the room when you turned around and looked. And we had a very good view of the VIP section. And it was hard to tell how many people might have been in the VIP section. But what we noticed is that during Donald Trump's luncheon speech, every time the audience, the uproar from the audience, the acclamation from the audience, and the standing ovation, when you looked in the back of the room, you could see nearly the entire room standing. When you looked towards the stage where the VIP section was, only a handful amongst the VIP were standing. Just a handful.
Right.
So with that, what we did on Saturday with what we called it an open house for the hour-long opportunity is that we had 2 guest speakers that were not scheduled, but they came to it through California MAGA members who somehow reached them. One of them is Clayton Hinson, who is considered one of Trump's top lieutenants in the field doing regional political direction. Clayton Hinson came and he addressed the crowd briefly, just to say hello and say he's not a public speaker and didn't have any words to say except he was really glad to see us. There was that, and then John Eastman was there. And when it was announced, John Eastman was at the very back of the room where there was standing room only and left in this room. And when it was announced that John Eastman was there towards the very beginning of our open house, and we asked him if he would say a few words, and he walked up the aisle. The emotion was palpable. Everybody stood in the room. The applause was deafening, and you could see on his face the look of surprise and deep humility and gratitude for the recognition by these 300 or more people in the room at what he is dealing with and going through on behalf of all of us, as well as on behalf of Donald Trump. It was a tremendous success. It was the buzz when we did the numbers. So we did that comparison with the attendance for the featured speakers. And so measuring them against Donald Trump's number of 1,536, Ramaswamy was 25%, DeSantis was 23%, and Tim Scott was 10%. Then what we did is we took the physical bodies that were available for delegates and associate delegates, which was 981. And we collected signatures of 32% of that number, approximately 32%. So we also use this as an opportunity to launch the website californiamaga.com. And I encourage everyone to go there, because what we believe that we have developed a formula, and it's a brand that we're working to make happen. And if once you visit it, wherever you are in the United States, if you want to do, for instance, Washington State MAGA, Michigan MAGA, Alabama MAGA, and build off that brand an Agenda 47 using the website that we have constructed and more's to come, I am happy to produce a visual prototype for your state, if you're interested, if you need to sell it to anybody. The last thing that I'll say, and then I will close, is that we agreed at the very beginning that we stand on our inalienable right, as described also in our Constitution, the right to assemble. We are not an organization. We are not licensed by anybody. We are men and women Americans who believe in America First and Agenda 47. We don't collect money, we don't ask for money, and yet we had enough donations and other opportunities that happened at the convention that basically we broke even for all of the expenses that we had.
Yeah,
And we
that's
don't
good.
ask for money. There's no way you can't give us money when you go to the website. We want nothing to do with all of we have enough people with their hands out. One piece of the website that we're going to be building out later this week includes telling people, amplify your voice by getting something for your money and your time now from any candidate who's out there. You tell that candidate that they have to do at least one of two things or both. They have to outright endorse Donald Trump, and or they must publicly condemn the two-tiered justice system that's going on. And we will be adding a page to our website that lets people know this is where you go to donate directly to Donald Trump's campaign. There are two places that you can go that is his, or he directs them. And or if you're going to donate to anybody in more local elections, and I mean state, federal, and city council, county, you name it, then here's a list of people throughout California. And here's a list of congressmen elsewhere, but here's a list of people throughout California who are publicly endorsing Donald Trump and or publicly condemning, and you can visit their websites to see it. And Mindy is one of them. If you have money to give, time to give it to these people. And you tell every other candidate to get behind Donald Trump to amplify the voice and to amplify Agenda 47 education. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that website, I mean, I'd like to put it in the chat, but the chat seems to be locked. But how do you find that website?
CaliforniaMaga.com.
All one word. Okay, great. That'll do.
CaliforniaMaga.com.
Yeah,
We haven't, and that's what's also interesting. We haven't fully finished optimizing it for internet search because we wanted to go through this weekend when we would get some traffic to see if we had any problems with it. We have had no problems at all. So throughout this week, I'll be working to further optimize it in search results.
Terrific. Yeah, thank you so much, Deborah. It's great to hear from you.
Okay, so let's hear from Tony Jennings, who's been organizing here in Michigan.
Okay. Well, first thing I want to say is to California and to Washington, you cannot imagine how remoralizing and inspiring it is for people to get reports out here on the work that you're doing. I've heard many times people say, boy, if we can do that in California or if we can do that in Washington State, we can do it anywhere. So it really inspires people. As far as organizing out here, I'll just say that the real power of the LaRouche movement that these globalists hate the most is that we are out there organizing other people face to face to take more responsibility, take the country back, because we are the majority. And we break up the narrative and we inspire people to get out there and stand up and actually say what they actually believe, which is really, really important. So I would say there's a sea change going on ever since the mugshot, and people heard it with "You indict, we unite," and we are really seeing that. I am happy to report in young people, what we're getting out here in Michigan is actually young people in positions of leadership, and I mean 19, 20, 21 years of age, who are coming to us, whether they're in the Republican Party or they're active on the college campus, and saying, you guys are out there doing something. Can I go out there and organize with you? Can I work with you? Can you give me a sense of how you're doing this? One young lady in particular, she's in her early 20s, and she's been to a couple post offices with us. This week, she wants to go to what's considered a liberal college, which I think is one word. I don't know what colleges, unfortunately, aren't liberal. But what she said to me was, I think it's really, really important that we get out there public, because I believe there are a lot of conservative thinkers and sane thinkers in these schools that are afraid to speak out because of the environment around them. So we're probably going to do that 1 or 2 days this week and do it as often as we can until the weather changes and we can't do it. Although on colleges, you can go inside and do it even when the weather is bad. We also had these young people, when they take responsibility, they get a little bit wiser. They don't react to these insane never Trumpers that we run into all the time in the field. One man was just going off in front of all of us using really foul language and attacking her personally. And she just remained very calm and said, sir, I think you're getting a little bit too emotional, too active. I'm afraid you're going to have a heart attack. Why don't you just calm down and we can talk about this? And he kind of stumbled and walked away. We have another young man who's been joining us at the post offices. And the funny thing is he is a auto worker, so he's on strike. So he's texting me almost every day saying, let me know what you're going to do. I want to join you. I think the strike is going to go on for a while, so I think I'll be able to get out there and do something. He also is wise. He really loves the sign we have that says President Trump, the only anti-war candidate. And he was actually holding it as he was going up and talking to people. And he ran into a never Trumper who was screaming, Trump's a racist, he's a rapist, he's raping all these women. And this young guy just calmly said, oh, really? All these women? Can you name one? Just one. You only have to name one. The guy couldn't name one and basically kind of mumbled and stumbled and walked.
We're fading out, Tony.
Okay, I haven't moved, so hopefully, is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, good. And also, I'd like to report we also have people my age. Frankly, these 20-year-olds are young enough to be my grandchildren, and they love working with us. But we also have people my age who are joining us at the auto lines, the strike lines, and the post offices, and just our visibility sites. And we're at a point now where on a week-to-week basis here in Michigan, maybe we could get out 1 or 2 deployments. We can get out 3, 4, or 5 deployments now because it just takes one of us, and we can get supporters who want to get active and want to actually do something to go out with us every week now. So that's really, really good. And I think that's one thing I wanted to bring up is that I just wanted people to really know that there is a break in the containment of the population. It's getting bad enough now where people are coming up to us and saying, if we don't do something, we're not going to have a country left. And I'll just say one last thing. That's also being said to me at post offices by 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds coming up to me and saying, I'm not going to convince you to not support Trump. You're not going to convince me to support Trump. But if you and I can't talk, this country is going to be gone. We've got to be able to sit down and we've got to be able to discuss this, or we're not going to have a country. So there is definitely a sea change going on. And I encourage everybody on the call to contact us. If you're near our office, you can join us in these deployment sites. If you're not, you can just call us and get some ideas on how to do it, where to go, and just put Trump back in the White House, because that's the mission.
Terrific.